The sun had not yet risen over the horizon when Samuel Adams was already up and preparing for another day of work on his small farm on the outskirts of Riverside, California. The San Joaquin Valley, known for its high-quality fruits that supplied the nation and beyond, had been his home since he was born 45 years ago. The son of humble farmers, Samuel carried in his calloused hands the story of a lifetime dedicated to the land. "It's going to be a hot one today, Braveheart," he said to his horse, a sturdy chestnut that had been his companion for over a decade. The animal whinnied in response, as if understanding every word. Together they traveled miles to deliver peaches, grapes, and guavas to local markets and, most importantly, to the large warehouse of the Star Market chain, which dominated food distribution across the West Coast. Samuel adjusted his straw hat and began sorting the fruits harvested the previous day. Beside him, his wife, Mrs. Emily, prepared breakfast while their two teenage children, Peter and Marina, helped organize the crates for transport. The four of them formed a well-coordinated team, driven by the dream of one day expanding their production and improving their quality of life. "Don't forget, today's the meeting with the buyers," Emily reminded him, serving a cup of strong coffee. "And wear the new shirt I bought you." Samuel nodded but had no intention of changing out of his usual work clothes. To him, a man's worth was in his labor, not his appearance. After loading the crates onto Braveheart, he bid his family farewell and set off toward town, where the annual Star Market supplier event was being held. The 40-minute journey gave Samuel time to reflect on how much had changed in recent years. A prolonged drought had forced many small farmers to sell their land to large corporations, accepting jobs as employees on the very properties they once owned. The constant pressure for lower prices and dependence on Star Market made each year harder than the last. Arriving at the event hall, Samuel tied Braveheart to a nearby tree and entered the venue. The contrast was immediate. Executives in impeccable suits, icy air conditioning, tables adorned with expensive floral arrangements, and a lavish breakfast that likely cost more than he earned in a week. Charles Mendelson, the regional manager of Star Market, a man in his 40s with graying temples and a smile that never reached his eyes, was surrounded by other executives when he spotted Samuel. "Well, look who's here. The last representative of the prehistoric era of farming," he exclaimed, eliciting laughter from those around him. "Tell me, Samuel, haven't they invented cars in your neck of the woods?" Samuel felt his face burn, but maintained his composure. Charles didn't stop there. "Gentlemen, this is the perfect example of what we need to eliminate from our supply chain: outdated methods, low productivity, and—" He paused, glancing at Samuel's boots. "A lack of adherence to the hygiene standards our customers expect." The laughter grew louder. Other suppliers, many of them former small farmers who now represented conglomerates, averted their eyes, embarrassed but silent. "I take pride in my work and the quality of my fruits," Samuel replied, his voice steady, despite the humiliation. "Quality?" Charles mocked. "Our consumers want uniformity, Samuel. Fruits that look like they came out of a 3D printer, understand? Your time is running out. Either you modernize, or you'll just be another forgotten chapter in the history of American agriculture." The meeting continued with the presentation of the company's new policies: even lower prices for suppliers, stricter aesthetic standards for fruits, and a new grading system that, in practice, meant much of the produce from small farmers like Samuel would be rejected. On the ride back home, mounted on Braveheart under the scorching midday sun, Samuel felt something shift within him. It wasn't just the humiliation burning in his chest, but the certainty that he needed to channel that anger into determination. When he arrived home, he found his family eagerly awaiting news. Careful not to alarm the children, he told Emily privately about what had happened. "They think they can treat us this way because we have no choice," Emily said indignantly. "What are we going to do, Samuel?" With his eyes fixed on the horizon, where his peach and grape orchards stretched out, Samuel replied, "I'm going to study. I'm going to learn everything I can about business, about how they operate. And one day, Emily, I'll show Charles Mendelson and all those who laugh today that a man of the land can be far more than they imagine." That same night, after everyone Had gone to bed, Samuel turned on the old computer his children used for school. With difficulty, he found a free online course on business management. It was the first step on a journey that would change not only his life, but the entire power balance in the San Joaquin Valley. 5 years had passed since that fateful day. Samuel's small farm had transformed into something few would recognize. Where there had once been only peaches, grapes, and guavas, now a diverse production of certified organic fruits stretched across additional acres he had gradually purchased from struggling neighbors. "You're revolutionizing family farming in the region, Mr. Adams," commented Ryan, a young, recently graduated agronomist Samuel had hired to help with sustainable farming techniques. "I've never seen anyone combine traditional knowledge with innovation like this." Samuel smiled faintly as they inspected the new drip irrigation system that saved up to 60% of water. This was just one of the many changes implemented since he began his nightly studies. First came the free online courses, then a specialization in agricultural management through a distance learning program, and finally, an immersion in digital marketing that completely transformed how he marketed his products. "I've learned that producing well isn't enough, Ryan. You have to tell the story behind the product," Samuel replied, watching the workers, now more, gather 20, carefully harvest the season's fruits. Emily approached, carrying a clipboard with the day's orders. In recent years, she had taken over the administrative management of the family business, which now supplied directly to high-end restaurants in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and even New York. The couple had created the brand Fruits of Perseverance, which had become synonymous with quality and social responsibility. "We have a new order from the Roots of the West restaurant," Emily informed him. "And that cooperative in New York called asking if we can increase our supply." Samuel nodded, satisfied. The decision to gradually reduce their dependence on Star Market had been risky but rewarding. They still sold a small portion of their produce to the chain, more as a strategic move than out of necessity. That evening, after a productive day, the family gathered for dinner along with Samuel's mother, Teresa, who lived with them. Peter, now 21, was studying agronomy at the State University, while Marina, 19, was pursuing a degree in business administration with a focus on sustainable enterprises. Both alternated between their studies and work on the family farm. "Dad, did you see the news?" Peter asked, passing the tablet to Samuel. "Star Market is facing serious financial troubles." Samuel read the headline with interest. "West Coast retail giant in crisis after mismanagement and competition from local cooperatives." The article detailed how the once dominant chain was losing market share to initiatives more connected to local producers and conscious consumption. The company's stock had plummeted, and rumors of a sale were circulating. "Times have changed," commented Teresa, who had seen her son transform the small farm into a respected enterprise. "Today's consumers want to know where their food comes from, and those who produce it want to be treated with respect," Samuel added, remembering the humiliation he had endured years ago. In the following days, Samuel intensified his research on Star Market's situation. As part of his study routine, he followed the financial market and had made small investments over the years. An idea began to take shape in his mind, but he would need allies. It was during a regional meeting of organic producers that Samuel met Laura Bennett, a former finance executive who had left New York to manage an organic coffee farm in Oregon. They immediately connected over their similar trajectories and business vision. "Mr. Adams, the model you've developed here could be replicated on a larger scale," Laura observed after visiting the Adams family farm. "Have you thought about that?" "I've thought about more than that," Samuel replied, deciding to share his idea. "Star Market is vulnerable. With the right investments and a group of committed producers, we could take control and transform the supply chain from within." Laura's eyes sparkled with the challenge. "That would require significant capital and knowledge of the financial market. I can help with the latter, but the capital—" "I have some contacts," Samuel interrupted. "Small investors who believe in our vision. And with your experience in finance, we could structure a gradual acquisition of shares." In the weeks that followed, an ambitious plan took shape. Samuel, Laura, and 5 other producers from different regions created an investment fund focused on sustainable agriculture. Using their own resources and funds from angel investors who believed in the potential of organized family farming, they began discreetly acquiring shares in Star Market. The process was slow and meticulous. For months, the group increased their stake without drawing attention, taking advantage of every drop in the stock price. Meanwhile, Samuel and his partners strengthened their alternative distribution networks, ensuring that, regardless of the acquisition's outcome, producers would have diversified sales channels. When the group reached 25% ownership, enough to have a voice on the board, the first direct confrontation occurred. Samuel, now a respectable businessman in a simple yet elegant suit, entered Star Market's headquarters in Los Angeles for the shareholders' meeting. Surprised glances followed him through the luxurious halls to the meeting room. Charles Mendelsohn, still the regional manager but visibly worn down by years of pressure and declining results, paled when he recognized Samuel among the new board members. The reaction was even more intense when Samuel formally introduced himself. Samuel Adams, representative of the Fruits of the Earth Fund, holding 25% of this company's shares. We're here to propose fundamental changes to the business model and the relationship with producers. The silence that followed marked the beginning of a new phase, not only for Samuel but for the entire regional food system. The seed planted years ago was finally bearing fruit that no one had anticipated. The initial impact of Samuel and his group's entry into Star Market's board was overwhelming. The old executives, accustomed to dictating market rules, suddenly found themselves challenged by those they once considered mere suppliers. The first battle was over transparency in pricing policies and margins, something Charles Mendelsohn and his team resisted fiercely. "What you're proposing is financially unfeasible," Charles argued during a tense board meeting. "Paying fair prices to producers while keeping prices competitive for consumers would destroy our margins." Samuel leaned forward in his chair, his calm expression contrasting with Charles's agitation. "What's unfeasible is continuing with a model that exploits producers and deceives consumers," Samuel replied calmly. "Our studies show that by eliminating unnecessary intermediaries and reducing waste, we can increase producers' earnings by 30% without significantly impacting the final price." When the vote took place, Samuel's group didn't secure a majority to implement all the desired changes, but achieved important victories: a new compensation policy for small producers and the creation of a line of organic products with full traceability. Behind the scenes, however, Charles Mendelsohn refused to accept the new reality. On a rainy afternoon, he called a secret meeting with other executives and some traditional major shareholders. "We need to act before these. Farmers ruin everything." "We've built," he said, the disdain evident in his voice. "I have a plan to force them to sell their shares." The next day, rumors about financial troubles in the Fruits of the Earth Fund began circulating in the market. Economic news outlets, clearly fed planted stories, questioned the group's ability to manage their investments. Simultaneously, several banks that traditionally financed agricultural production announced revisions to their credit policies, directly affecting the fund's members. Samuel was at his farm, now transformed into a modern administrative headquarters that retained its rural essence, when he received a call from Laura. "They're trying to destabilize us," she informed him, her voice tense. "3 of our investors have already called me worried about the rumors." "It was expected," Samuel replied, looking out the window at the transformed property. Charles wouldn't easily accept losing control. "Let's implement Plan B." Plan B had been carefully crafted months earlier, anticipating possible retaliation. The following week, Samuel and his partners announced the creation of the Living Earth Network, a cooperative of producers that would take over the direct distribution of food to consumers, initially in West Coast cities. "We're not just creating another distribution channel," Samuel explained in an interview with the nation's leading economic newspaper. "We're revolutionizing the relationship between producers and consumers, eliminating exploitation and waste from the current system." The announcement had an immediate effect. Star Market's stock fell further. while the Living Earth network received massive support from small and medium-sized producers. The model's main innovation was its subscription system. Consumers paid monthly fees to receive personalized baskets of fresh produce directly from farms, with prices up to 20% lower than traditional supermarkets. As the Living Earth network grew in popularity, Star Market faced an unprecedented crisis. Within 3 months, other retail chains began copying elements of the model, forcing a transformation across the industry. Charles Mendelsohn, watching his empire crumble, made one last desperate attempt. Using his political connections, he convinced regulators to question technical aspects of the Living Earth network, causing delays in permits and requiring costly operational adjustments. Samuel received the news during a meeting with Peter and Marina, his children who now held strategic positions in the family business. "It's the last gasp of an outdated model," Marina commented, analyzing the notification documents. "We can resolve this in weeks, it's just bureaucratic red tape. The important thing is to keep growing while we handle these details," Peter added. "Our producers can't be harmed." Samuel smiled, proud to see how his children had absorbed not only technical knowledge, but also the values guiding all his decisions. "Let's turn this obstacle into an opportunity," he decided. "Invite the press for an open tour of all our facilities. Total transparency. We'll show we have nothing to hide." The strategy worked even better than expected. Positive media coverage not only neutralized the accusations, but significantly increased consumer interest in the Living Earth network. In an ironic twist, Charles's attempt to harm the business ended up propelling it to new heights. When Star Market's stock hit its lowest point, Samuel's group made their final move, a public offer, to acquire full control of the chain. With accumulated resources and new investors attracted by the Living Earth network's success, they gathered enough capital for the transaction. On the day the offer was accepted, and control of Star Market officially passed to the fruits of the Earth Fund, Samuel made a point of arriving at the company's headquarters mounted on Braveheart, his faithful horse now aged but still strong. The scene caused a stir among employees and onlookers gathered at the entrance. Charles Mendelsohn watched from the window of his office, which would soon no longer be his. When Samuel entered the building, wearing an elegant suit but retaining the simplicity that defined him, Charles knew his time was up. The meeting between the two was brief and surprisingly civil. "You're going to fire me, I assume," Charles said, trying to maintain his dignity. "No," Samuel replied, to the executive's surprise. "I'm offering you a choice. You can stay with the company, but in a new role, coordinator of small producer relations. The salary will be lower, but you'll have the opportunity to learn what you never cared to know, the reality of those who feed this nation." Charles was speechless at the unexpected proposal. It wasn't the revenge he had imagined, but something deeper and more challenging. The following week, Samuel presented the transformation plan for Star Market. The chain would gradually integrate with the Living Earth network, creating a hybrid model that combined traditional supermarket infrastructure with the fair trade and sustainability principles of the cooperative. On a sunny afternoon, 6 months after taking control, Samuel gathered his family on the porch of the house where he had grown up. Looking out at the land that was now part of a much larger movement, he reflected on the journey. "When I was humiliated at that meeting, I felt like I had hit rock bottom," he confessed to Emily, who had stood by his side through every moment. "I never imagined that day would be the beginning of all this." Emily squeezed his hand, watching the sunset over the orchards that now stretched beyond the horizon. "You turned pain into purpose, Samuel. And not just for us, but for thousands of families." From the horizon, a convoy of trucks with the Living Earth Network logo approached, returning from another successful day of deliveries. It was the harvest of years of work, study, and perseverance, a harvest far more abundant than Samuel had ever dreamed.